Tomorrow, a rather obscure body called the Facebook Oversight Board is set to announce whether Donald Trump can return to the company's platforms. The board, which is comprised of 20 people, is funded and created by Facebook. Members include some human rights advocates, former politicians, some journalists, a bunch of lawyers, folks from all over the world, including someone we have had on this show as a guest, Jamal Green, who's a law professor at Columbia University. By about 9 a.m. tomorrow, they will announce their decision whether or not Trump gets back on Facebook after a 4-month ban. And to tell you the truth, the whole thing seems like something out of a science fiction novel. We're sitting here tonight wondering if the advisory board to one of the most powerful corporations on earth will allow the former president to once again post his inflammatory nonsense. Not to mention what this says about broader questions of free speech, how much power a private company like Facebook has over it. Two people perfect to talk about this are Adam Conner, the founder of Facebook's Washington, D.C. office and vice president of technology policy for the Center for American Progress, and Evelyn Douek, a lecturer on free speech issues at Harvard Law School, and they both join me now. Evelyn, let me start with you. You're someone who I read a lot on this stuff. You're a main source for what I know about it. Can you just tell us what the deal is with the board? Like, what is this weird entity?
It is. It's super weird, isn't it? I agree with the science fiction diagnosis, or perhaps, kayfabe, given the President Trump's history with professional wrestling. It's this strange body that was sort of set up. I actually had a look. The first time I wrote about it was 3 years and 1 month ago, when it was a thought bubble from Mark Zuckerberg on an Ezra Klein podcast. The idea being that I guess he was kind of sick of getting slammed for all of the controversial decisions that Facebook has to make about the content that is or is not allowed on its platform. And so here it is, someone that he can throw the content moderation hot potato to. Obviously, that's not how they frame it. It's a check and balance into the system of Facebook, an independent oversight mechanism to make sure that the company is making the decisions in the best interests of all of us rather than just in its own best interests.
Adam, you worked at Facebook pretty early on, as I recall. I knew you in Washington, D.C. I remember you going to work for the company at that time. What do you think they should do here? I mean, do you have strong feelings about the power it has now and what the right decision is here?
Absolutely. And I think Evelyn and what the writing should have done has hit a lot of these issues head on. But I think, look, I've been thinking about what politicians can and should do on Facebook for, I think, maybe longer than anyone else in the world. And to me, this isn't particularly hard. Donald Trump shouldn't be let back on Facebook and Instagram because he's already proven himself to be such a clear and present threat to democracy. And I think that is really the issue that is most important. I think what the Oversight Board and others want to also talk about is whatever broad precedents this may set for leaders across the world. But I think if you look at the facts of the case, it's really important to keep in mind that this was the tool. Facebook and Twitter was the tool that Donald Trump used to delegitimize the election. We did some research at CAP, and in the 65 days between the election and the insurrection, Trump only appeared on camera 28 times, but he tweeted and Facebooked 2,200 times, and a majority of that was to delegitimize the election. So this is a tool that he primarily uses to tear down democracy. And I think having seen what happened after the Mueller report and impeachment, we know what happens if he gets exonerated or let back on the platform. He's just going to continue to do that over and over again, even more.
Yeah, Evelyn, I guess I'm persuaded by Adam's point here in the narrow sense of Donald Trump, who is in some ways a somewhat sui generis figure, both in who he is and his relationship to social media. But the broader implications don't sit great with me. I mean, I remember reading that Alexei Navalny response and being like, well, that's a guy with a lot of skin in the game who I wouldn't necessarily think had that position, but he clearly thinks there's a principle at stake that's dangerous about ceding too much power over control of speech writ large to these companies. And I just don't know how to think through that. How should I?
Yeah, it was a very interesting moment in the wake of the great deplatforming, as it's become known, where a bunch of people that you wouldn't normally think of as Donald Trump's allies, including Angela Merkel from Germany, sort of expressed displeasure and discomfort at the decisions by Facebook and Twitter. This idea of like, first they came for Donald Trump, and I said nothing, concern about their own accounts and what it was that these companies could do. And I think that there's there's a good reason. I think progressives for a long time have been very concerned about the power that these private corporations exercise in a completely unaccountable way over our public sphere.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.